It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Emily Parker climbed up the old wooden stairs that led to her grandmother's attic. Dust floated in the warm sunlight that slipped through the small window. The air smelled like old books and forgotten memories. Emily had always loved exploring old places. After her grandmother Margaret passed away 2 months ago, the house felt empty, like time had stopped. Margaret had lived here for over 60 years, and every corner of the house held a story. Emily's parents wanted to sell the house soon, but before that, she wanted to clean the attic. It was filled with boxes, suitcases, and old furniture untouched for decades. As she moved a box aside, something caught her eye: a small wooden chest, half buried under old blankets. The lock was rusty, and the top was covered in dust. "Grandma never told me about this," she whispered. Emily pulled it out carefully, wiped the dust, and tried to open it. The lock broke easily. Inside were a few old photographs, a broken wristwatch, and a bundle of yellowed papers tied with a faded blue ribbon. She untied the ribbon and saw that it was a stack of letters, all written in the same neat handwriting. The first one was dated June 12, 1964. Emily sat down on the old wooden floor, heart beating faster. She began to read. "My dearest Margaret, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I'm writing because I can't leave without telling you the truth. What happened that night was not an accident. And I fear that if I don't tell you everything, you will never forgive me, or understand why I had to go." Emily froze. "What is this?" she whispered. The letter was signed, "With love, Thomas." But Emily had never heard that name before. She knew her grandfather's name, Robert Parker, and he died many years ago. Who was this Thomas? Her heart started racing. The handwriting looked delicate, full of emotion. There were tear stains on the paper, real ones. Emily kept reading. "You told me once that love is about honesty. So I must be honest now. The truth is, Robert wasn't supposed to know about us. But he found the letter I wrote you last month. He came to me that night, and things went wrong, very wrong." Emily's eyes widened. She felt chills down her spine. "Wait, what?" "Robert," she whispered. She read further, but the next page was torn. Half of the words were missing. Suddenly, she realized this wasn't just an old love letter, it was something deeper. Maybe a secret her grandmother had kept hidden for 60 years. She picked up the other letters. There were at least 6 of them, all from the same man, Thomas. Some were never opened. Emily felt both excited and afraid. She stood up, holding the letters close to her chest, and walked downstairs to the living room where her mother, Sarah, was sorting through photo albums. "Mom," Emily said, "who is Thomas?" Sarah looked up, confused. "Thomas who?" Emily showed her the letter. Her mother frowned and took the paper carefully, as if it were something fragile. She read it in silence for a few moments. Her hands trembled slightly. "Where did you find this?" she asked softly. "In Grandma's attic," Emily said. "There's a whole bunch of them." Sarah took a deep breath, then looked away. I've never heard of a Thomas. Your grandmother never mentioned anyone by that name." Emily could see something in her mother's eyes, confusion mixed with fear. "I think Grandma had a secret," Emily said quietly. Her mother didn't reply. She just stared at the letter. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the man who wrote those words 60 years ago. Who was Thomas? What did he mean by "that night was not an accident"? She got up from bed and sat by the window. The moonlight filled her room. The letters were on her desk, waiting to be read. She opened another one, dated July 5, 1964. "Margaret, I saw the newspaper today. They're saying Robert's car went off the bridge after midnight. I can't stop thinking that maybe it was my fault. I didn't mean for things to go that way. You need to know I didn't push him. He came at me, and I. The letter ended there. No signature. No explanation. Emily's heart pounded. Her grandmother's husband, her grandfather, died in a car accident in 1964. That's what everyone had always said. But this letter said it wasn't an accident. She stared at the page in shock. Could her grandmother have been in love with another man? Did that man have something to do with her grandfather's death? The more Emily thought about it, the more she realized this was a secret her grandmother had buried for a lifetime. She whispered to herself, "Grandma, what did you hide from us?" As she held the torn letter, a small folded note fell from the bundle. It wasn't a letter, it looked like a map. A hand-drawn map with a red X mark behind the house near the old oak tree. Emily felt a chill run through her body. She looked out the window. The same oak tree still stood there even after 60 years. Her curiosity was stronger than her fear now. She grabbed a flashlight, wrapped the letters in a cloth, and quietly stepped outside into the cool night air. The grass was wet, the wind cold. She followed the map carefully. Every step made her heart beat faster. When she reached the oak tree, she saw something unusual. The soil under it looked disturbed, as if someone had dug there before. She knelt down, brushed the dirt aside, and found the corner of an old metal box buried just beneath the roots. Her hands shook as she pulled it free. "Grandma," she whispered, "what were you hiding here?" And as she opened the box, she gasped. Inside was something that would change everything she thought she knew about her family. Emily's hands trembled as she lifted the lid of the old metal box. The hinges creaked loudly, echoing in the still night. Inside, wrapped in plastic to keep out the moisture, were 2 old photographs, a small velvet ring box, and a sealed envelope marked only with one word: "Forgive." Her heart pounded. The box smelled of earth and time. She slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, the paper yellow and thin, but the handwriting was the same as before. It was from Thomas again. "Margaret, if you ever find this, please know that I never wanted to hurt anyone. The truth of that night has haunted me every day. I loved you, and I still do, but the past cannot be undone. I buried this so the truth would not destroy your family. But if Emily finds it, then maybe it's time the truth is known." Emily's breath caught. Emily. He wrote her name. "How could he know my name?" she whispered. The letter was dated 1970, 6 years after her grandfather's death and decades before Emily was even born. She felt a strange chill crawl up her spine. It didn't make sense. How could Thomas have known she would be the one to find this? Her flashlight flickered. The night seemed to grow colder around her. For a moment, she felt like someone was watching. She shook her head, forcing herself to breathe. "Get it together, Emily," she muttered. She picked up the photographs. One was of her grandmother, Margaret, standing by the lake with a young man, tall, dark hair, gentle smile. The second photo was shocking. It was of the same man holding a baby. On the back, written faintly, "Me, Margaret, and Sarah, 1964. Emily froze. Sarah. That was her mother's name. Her mind raced. If Thomas was in the photo holding baby Sarah, what did that mean? She ran back inside the house, clutching the box tightly. Her mother was still awake, sitting on the couch, staring at the fireplace. "Mom, you need to see this," Emily said breathlessly. Sarah looked up, startled, as Emily placed the box in front of her and showed her the photo. Her mother's face turned pale. She picked up the picture with shaking hands, staring at the young man beside her mother, the man she had never seen before. "Who is he?" Emily asked softly. Sarah swallowed hard. That looks like my mother, but I don't recognize him." "His name was Thomas," Emily said. "And look, that's you. He's holding you, Mom." Sarah stared for a long time, her lips trembling. That can't be true. My father was Robert. Emily took a deep breath. Mom, what if that's not true? For a moment, silence filled the room. The ticking of the old wall clock sounded painfully loud. Sarah shook her head. No, your grandmother would never, but her voice broke before she could finish. Emily showed her the letter that mentioned her name, the one dated 1970. Sarah's eyes widened. Emily, this isn't possible. How could he know your name? I don't know, Emily whispered. But he wrote it? He said, if Emily finds this, then maybe it's time the truth is known. Sarah pressed her hands to her face. Tears started to roll down her cheeks. I remember when I was little, she said softly, Mom used to sit by the window every night, waiting. She'd hold an old letter sometimes, and she'd cry quietly. I thought she missed Dad. But maybe it was someone else. Emily placed her hand gently on her mother's shoulder. Mom, maybe Grandma wanted us to find this after she was gone. Maybe she couldn't tell you when she was alive. Sarah nodded slowly, eyes still on the photograph. Then we need to know who Thomas really was. The next morning, Emily and Sarah drove to the county records office. They searched old newspapers, obituaries, and property files from the 1960s. Hours passed before Emily found something, a small article dated June 14, 1964. Local man Thomas Miller reported missing after a car accident involving Robert Parker. Authorities confirm only one body recovered. Investigation closed. Emily's eyes widened. Thomas Miller, that's him. Sarah read the article, tears welling up again. He didn't die that night, he disappeared. They looked at each other in silence. Emily whispered, do you think Grandma knew he survived? Sarah didn't answer. But at that moment, Emily noticed something strange. On the back of the article, written in pencil, were faint words, a note someone must have scribbled years ago. He lives in Blue Ridge County. Tell Margaret he's waiting. Emily felt her heart race. Blue Ridge County was only 2 hours away. Mom, she said, what if Thomas is still alive? Sarah stared at her, speechless. After 60 years. I know it sounds crazy, Emily said, but if he wrote that letter to me, maybe he knew someday I'd come looking. Sarah hesitated. Emily, this could be a mistake. People move on, they change. But what if he didn't? Emily interrupted gently. What if Grandma never got that message? What if he waited all his life? Sarah looked down at the old photograph again, her mother, young and smiling beside Thomas. Then she looked at Emily. All right, she said finally. Let's go. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Emily packed the letters and photographs in her backpack. The road to Blue Ridge County stretched ahead, quiet, empty, and full of unanswered questions. As they drove away from the old house, Emily looked out the window, the image of her grandmother's face lingering in her mind. She whispered softly, Grandma, we're going to find him. We're going to finish your story. The headlights cut through the darkness as the car disappeared down the lonely country road. But deep inside Emily's heart, she could feel it, the truth waiting at the end of this journey wasn't just about love or loss. It was about a secret that had changed 3 generations, and was finally ready to be revealed. The drive to Blue Ridge County was quiet. The sky was gray, and light rain brushed against the windshield. Emily sat in the passenger seat, staring at the old letters on her lap. Her mother, Sarah, kept her eyes on the road, lost in thought. Neither spoke much. The air inside the car felt heavy, filled with questions that neither of them dared to ask out loud. After 2 hours, they reached a small town surrounded by green hills and tall pine trees. The sign at the edge of the road read, Welcome to Blue Ridge County, EST 1881. Emily looked around. The town looked peaceful, small houses, a single diner, and an old gas station with a faded sign. Everything felt like it hadn't changed in decades. Sarah parked the car outside the diner. "Let's ask someone here," she said softly. They stepped inside. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. A few locals sat at the counter, talking quietly. An older man behind the counter smiled politely. "What can I get you, ladies?" he asked. "Actually," Sarah said, "we're looking for someone. Maybe you can help." The man raised an eyebrow. "Who's that?" "His name's Thomas Miller," Emily said. "He used to live here, maybe a long time ago." At the sound of that name, the man's expression changed slightly, like he recognized it but wasn't sure if he should say something. He wiped his hands on a towel. "Thomas Miller, yeah, that name rings a bell. You might want to ask at the old Willow Rest home down the road. There's an old guy there, name's Tom Miller. Quiet man. Keeps to himself." Emily's heart skipped. "He's alive." The man shrugged. "Far as I know. Been there a few years now." Sarah thanked him, and they left quickly. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still cloudy. The road to the rest home was narrow, lined with tall trees that whispered in the wind. When they reached it, Emily felt her hands trembling. The sign outside read, "Willow Rest Home, caring for seniors since 1985. They walked through the doors. A nurse at the front desk greeted them warmly. "Hello," Sarah said gently. "We're looking for someone, Thomas Miller. We were told he lives here." The nurse smiled softly. "Oh, Mr. Miller. Yes, he's here. He doesn't get many visitors." She led them down a quiet hallway. Emily's heart thumped faster with every step. Finally, they stopped in front of a small room with an open door. Inside, an old man sat by the window, looking out at the garden. His hair was white, his face lined with deep wrinkles. But there was still something familiar about his expression. "Mr. Miller," the nurse said softly, "you have visitors." The old man turned slowly. His eyes were pale blue, tired, but gentle. "Visitors," he said, his voice soft and unsure. Emily stepped forward. "Mr. Miller, my name is Emily Parker." He blinked. "Parker?" "Yes," she said. "My grandmother's name was Margaret Parker. I think, you knew her." For a moment, the room went silent. Then his eyes filled with tears. His lips trembled as he whispered, "Margaret." He reached for the small pendant that hung around his neck, a silver heart-shaped locket. He opened it. Inside was a photo of Margaret, young and smiling. Sarah gasped softly. Emily felt her chest tighten. Thomas's voice shook. "I thought I'd never hear that name again." He looked at Sarah for a long time, then at Emily. You look like her." Sarah swallowed hard. "Mr. Miller, we found your letters. In my mother's attic. We found everything." Thomas nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I wrote those letters when I had nothing left but guilt. I wanted her to know the truth, but I couldn't face her. Not after what happened that night." He looked out the window again. "Robert came to me angry. He found one of the letters I wrote to Margaret. He thought I was trying to take her away. I tried to explain, but he pushed me. He slipped near the edge of the bridge. I reached for him, but I couldn't save him." His voice broke. "Everyone thought I died too. Maybe it was easier that way. I left everything behind." Sarah wiped her eyes. "All these years, my mother never told me." Thomas turned to her gently. "She wanted to protect you. She raised you strong. She loved you, Sarah. She never stopped loving you." Emily stepped closer. "Mr. Miller, this letter," she showed him the one that mentioned her name, "dated 1970. You wrote my name before I was even born. How did you know? Thomas smiled faintly. Your grandmother told me once, if she ever had a granddaughter, she'd name her Emily. She said she wanted her to have a kind heart, and the courage to seek truth. Emily felt her eyes sting with tears. Thomas reached for her hand. And here you are. You found me. The room was silent except for the sound of rain starting again outside. Sarah and Emily sat beside him for hours, listening as he spoke softly about his love for Margaret, how they had met before she married Robert, how they had written letters even when they knew it was wrong, and how guilt had kept him silent for 60 years. Finally, Thomas looked at Sarah. I have something for you. He reached into the drawer beside his bed and pulled out a small, folded note. I kept this all these years. It's from Margaret. Sarah opened it carefully. The paper was fragile, the ink faded, but the words were clear. If you ever find Thomas, tell him I forgave him long ago. Love never dies, even when time tries to bury it. Tears streamed down Sarah's face. Emily hugged her tightly. Thomas smiled weakly. She never forgot. The sun began to break through the clouds outside, lighting up the small room. For the first time in 60 years, peace seemed to settle in Thomas's tired eyes. Emily whispered, she wanted us to find you. She wanted the truth to be known. Thomas nodded. Now it is. He closed his eyes and smiled. Thank you, Emily. And in that quiet room, surrounded by the scent of rain and memory, Emily realized something: love stories never truly end. They just wait for someone to finish them. The next morning, sunlight poured gently through the window of Thomas's small room. Emily stood by the window, watching the light dance across the floor. Her mother, Sarah, sat beside the old man's bed, holding his hand. Thomas looked weak but peaceful. There was something soft in his eyes, a calm that comes only after years of pain finally start to fade. He smiled faintly. I never thought I'd see Margaret again, and yet, seeing you both here feels like she's with us. Sarah squeezed his hand gently. She's always been with you. She kept every letter. Thomas nodded, his voice quiet. She was the love of my life. I thought time would make me forget, but I never did. I used to walk by the lake every year on her birthday. I'd talk to her, even though she wasn't there. Emily felt tears fill her eyes. She must have felt the same, she whispered. Thomas looked at her and smiled softly. You have her eyes, Emily. Curious. Brave. Always searching for truth. Emily's throat tightened. I think she wanted me to find you to finish what she couldn't. He nodded slowly. Then you've done more than you know. After breakfast, Sarah stepped outside for some fresh air, leaving Emily alone with Thomas. The old man reached under his blanket and pulled out a small leather notebook. This, he said, handing it to her, is my story, everything I never told anyone. If you read it, you'll understand who your grandmother truly was, and how strong love can be, even when life tries to break it. Emily held the book gently. I'll take care of it. Thomas smiled. Promise me one thing, Emily, don't let the past make you bitter. Let it make you better. She nodded, tears falling silently. For a few minutes, neither spoke. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock and the birds singing outside the window. Then Thomas whispered, if I could go back, I wouldn't change meeting her. Even knowing the pain that followed, I'd still choose her. Emily smiled through her tears. She would have said the same. He chuckled softly. She always did have a stubborn heart. The room filled with quiet laughter, the kind that warms the air even when sadness lingers. Later that day, the nurse came in to check on Thomas. You have strong visitors, she said kindly. You must be special. Thomas smiled faintly. I've been blessed. Sarah returned with a bouquet of wildflowers she had picked from the garden outside. She placed them beside his bed. Mom used to love these, she said softly. Thomas looked at them, his eyes glistening. She did. Every spring she'd say the same thing: flowers die, but they come back stronger next season. She believed love was the same way. Emily felt her heart ache in the sweetest way. That evening, they stayed with him as the sun began to set behind the hills. The light turned golden, filling the room with warmth. Thomas asked them to open the window so he could feel the breeze. "I always loved the sound of the wind," he said. "Margaret used to say it was the earth whispering stories." Sarah smiled faintly. "She said that to me, too." For a long moment, the three of them sat in silence, watching the sun disappear behind the trees. Then Thomas turned to Emily. "You know, I kept one last letter for her. I never sent it. Would you read it for me?" Emily nodded. He pointed to the drawer beside his bed. Inside was a sealed envelope, worn and fragile. On the front, written in shaky handwriting, were the words, "For Margaret, my forever love." Emily opened it carefully. Her voice trembled as she began to read. "My dearest Margaret. If this letter ever finds you, I want you to know that you were my beginning and my end. I loved you not for how the world saw you, but for how you saw the world. You taught me that love is not about being together forever, it's about remembering forever. I forgive the world for separating us, because love is stronger than time. If souls can meet again, I'll wait by the lake, the place where we first met, until you come back to me." Asterisk. When Emily finished reading, her voice cracked. Sarah wiped her tears silently. Thomas smiled weakly, eyes glistening. "She'll meet me there," he whispered. "I know she will." Emily held his hand. "She's already there, Thomas. You've just been waiting to see her again." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe, it's time." He closed his eyes, his breathing soft and steady. The room fell silent. The golden light faded into night. A few moments later, the nurse quietly entered, checked his pulse, and looked at them with gentle eyes. "He's gone," she said softly. Sarah gasped quietly, covering her mouth. Emily felt her heart break, but strangely, there was peace in the room. The air felt lighter, calm. Sarah leaned close and whispered, "He's with her now." Emily looked out the window. The wind rustled through the trees, just like he said, the earth whispering stories. And in that moment, Emily felt something, a warmth, like a soft touch on her shoulder. She smiled through her tears. "Goodbye, Thomas," she whispered. "You kept your promise." A week later, Emily and Sarah returned to their hometown. They buried Thomas's notebook and the last letter beneath the old oak tree, the same place where Emily had first found the box. As they stood there, Emily looked up at the sky. The clouds parted, and sunlight broke through, golden and gentle, just like that day in the room. Sarah placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Do you think they found each other?" she asked quietly. Emily smiled. "I think they never lost each other." The leaves of the old tree rustled softly in the wind, almost like laughter carried through time. And somewhere, beyond the limits of years and distance, two souls who had waited far too long finally walked hand in hand, free, forgiven, and forever together. It had been 3 months since Thomas Miller's passing. The days had grown warmer, and the small town where Margaret Parker once lived felt peaceful again. The Parker house, once quiet and heavy with secrets, now felt alive. Sunlight streamed through the windows, and the scent of fresh paint filled the air. Emily and her mother Sarah had decided not to sell it after all. Instead, they wanted to keep it not as a house of sadness, but as a place of memory, love, and truth. One morning, Emily climbed the stairs to the attic again. The same wooden boards creaked under her feet, but now the space didn't feel dark or lonely. She smiled as she looked at the spot where she'd first found the box. On the small wooden table sat Thomas's leather notebook, the one he had given her before he passed. She sat down, opened it, and began to read. Asterisk to whoever finds this. Love is not about how long it lasts. It's about how deeply it touches you. I lived my whole life carrying regret, but also gratitude because I once knew a love pure enough to last beyond time. If you're reading this, remember, tell people you love them while you can. Speak the truth, even if it hurts. Because silence is heavier than heartbreak. Asterisk. Emily closed the notebook, tears glistening in her eyes. Those words weren't just about the past anymore, they were about her, her mother, and everyone who had ever held back feelings out of fear. Downstairs, Sarah was sitting by the window with a cup of tea. She was looking out at the old oak tree now surrounded by new flowers they had planted around the spot where Thomas's notebook and letter rested. When Emily came down, Sarah smiled faintly. "You were reading it again, weren't you?" Emily nodded. "It feels like he's still teaching me things." Sarah laughed softly. "He taught us all something, didn't he?" "Yes," Emily said. "That love never really ends. It just changes shape." They sat together in silence for a while, watching the sunlight dance through the leaves. The house no longer felt like a place of mystery, it felt like a home again. A few weeks later, Emily decided to turn everything she had discovered into a small project, something to keep the story alive. She collected the letters, the photographs, and Thomas's notebook, and created a display in the attic, a quiet corner she called the Room of Letters. She placed a framed sign on the wall. "In memory of Margaret Parker and Thomas Miller, two hearts that waited a lifetime to meet again." People from the town started to visit. Some came out of curiosity, others out of emotion. Many left in tears, touched by the story of love, forgiveness, and fate. An old woman once told Emily, "It's rare, dear, to see love like that, the kind that survives silence." Emily smiled softly and replied, "I think that's why they wanted us to find it." Months later, on a clear autumn afternoon, Emily sat by the lake, the same lake where Thomas and Margaret had once met, long ago. The water shimmered under the golden sunlight. She held a copy of Thomas's final letter in her hand, the one that ended with, "I'll wait by the lake until you come back to me." The wind brushed through her hair, and for a moment, she could almost imagine two figures standing together at the edge of the water, Margaret in her white summer dress, and Thomas beside her, smiling. She whispered softly, "You found each other, didn't you?" A gentle breeze rippled the water, almost like an answer. Emily smiled, wiped her eyes, and stood up. "Goodbye, Grandma. Goodbye, Thomas. Thank you for showing me what real love looks like." She threw a small white rose into the lake and watched it float away free and peaceful. That night, back at home, Sarah joined her on the porch. The stars were bright, and the air smelled like rain. "You know," Sarah said quietly, "for so many years, I thought Mom's life was full of secrets. But now I see she wasn't hiding pain. She was protecting love." Emily nodded. "And now, that love lives in us." Sarah smiled. "It does." They sat together, looking up at the sky. For the first time in years, everything felt right. Emily thought about how it all started: a dusty attic, a hidden box, and a forgotten letter. She realized that sometimes, the smallest discoveries can uncover the biggest truths. Before going to bed, Emily wrote something in Thomas's notebook, on the very last blank page. Asterisk to the next person who finds this. Don't be afraid to look back. Sometimes the past holds the key to the peace you've been searching for. Love doesn't end. It just waits for someone brave enough to find it again. Asterisk. She placed the notebook back on the attic table, beside the old letters tied with the blue ribbon. Then she turned off the light. The moonlight fell across the room, softly illuminating the letters, symbols of a love that time couldn't erase. Outside, the wind whispered through the oak tree, carrying the sound of leaves and memories. And though the house was still and quiet, Somewhere in the gentle rustle of the night it felt like two souls were laughing together again. The end.